This is where we are again in the Amida Sutra, talking about Anathapindika, one of the famous patrons in Buddhism. And last time where we left off, we talked about the lessons, the discourses that the Buddha gave to Anathapindika, and we talked about the 5 reasons for getting rich. And then now we will talk about the conditions, where that would allow one to live long and reach great age. We talked about being wealthy, and so in today's short discourse that the Buddha gave to Anathapindika should be of interest to those who want to live long and reach great age. The Buddha later on also taught Anathapindika how one should use one's money to develop the 4 good deeds of faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. So how do we develop and attain faith and virtue, generosity, and wisdom? Well, let's go through the first part of this short discourse given by the Buddha to Anathapindika, and will explain in detail. So House Father, referring to Anathapindika, the Buddha says, there are these 4 conditions: desirable, dear, delightful, hard to win in the world. So these conditions, if we developed, are very precious to us because they can be very helpful to us to live a healthy, happy life, as well as a life that leads to enlightenment, to be liberated forever from the suffering in the cycle of life and death. And what are the 4? So, may wealth. One is wealth gained by lawful means. The other one is to live long life, a meaningful life, and that to attain heavenly rebirth, or a delightful rebirth in the next life. So now House Father, the winning of these 4 conditions conduce. What are the 4? Perfections of faith, perfections of virtue, perfections of generosity, and perfection of wisdom. So these are the 4 that I would like to focus on in today's discourse. So first, for what is faith and how can we attain faith? In the text, the author indicates that faith can be won. In a way, he is summarizing from the sutras. Faith can be won if one fully acknowledges the Blessed One, meaning the Buddha, and his message, meaning the teaching about the nature of existence. So first, there are 3 things that we can base on to have faith in the Buddha. So this helps us to develop faith, because faith is something that nobody can see, nobody can prove. It's emotionally based. But it's more than just an emotion. But faith is the emotional side of wisdom. In Mahayana Buddhism, it teaches that all sentient beings are in possession of the element of Buddhahood. 每个众生都有佛性, right? 大家众生đều có Phật tánh. Because they are in possession of the Buddha nature, that it's only natural that they feel an affinity, yuan, for enlightenment. All sentient beings have this called the Buddha nature, right? There are Indian scriptural sources on Buddha nature theory, one of which is the Ratnagara-Chavi-Bharga. This text here talks about the Buddha nature theory. Essentially, it says that if sentient beings don't possess the Buddha nature in them, they won't have any interest in avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure. There won't be any wish for nirvana and enlightenment, and there won't be any striving or resolve to win it. So there's got to be something in us that resonates with the higher part of life, that motivates us to gain, to pursue it. We can use the idea of resonance of a tuning fork to explain this theory. So here's a tuning fork. When the two forks are made of the same frequency, when you strike one and you stop the vibration, this vibration transfers over. Here's a box. It resonates. It produces sound. And the sound waves will impinge on this right fork, and the right fork will start to resonate. Only if the two are made of the same frequency, if they are at the same frequency. If they are at different frequencies, then this will not vibrate. In other words, we have something that is of the same intrinsic nature with the Buddha, of the same quality of Buddha that we can resonate with, the supreme enlightenment. So this Buddha nature is the positive side of this I'll call nature. In actuality, this nature of us is neutral, meaning that it can resonate with the bad or good, skillful or unskillful, 善或者不善，thiện hoặc là bất thiện. However, once this nature has gone through the ultimate refinement and development, and the Buddha nature is realized, meaning it cannot become bad, negative, or unskillful. That's what we call Buddha nature. But before we attain the Buddha nature, it's just nature, and it can be either bad or good. But until you gained enlightenment, that Buddha nature is Buddha nature. Then it can only be absolutely good, skillful, and positive. Because a Buddha cannot retrogress to become a deluded mundane being, 凡夫, 凡夫. It's impossible for Buddhas to retrogress, 退转, 退转. So it's nature, but until we gain enlightenment, and it's really Buddha nature. But until then, the nature of mundane beings, sentient beings, is neutral, and it can swing either towards the negative or the positive. For example, if one hears of enlightenment, compassion, and selflessness, one feels inspired and wants to learn about those things, those ideas, those principles, then one is resonating with the positive in the directions of no suffering. On the other hand, when one resonates with the idea of hatred, vengeance, and greed, then suffering is not far away. Does it make sense? Right? So we can resonate with, and we can tell that our future is going to be of suffering or happiness, depending on what we resonate with. The scripture says that the whole being of Anathapindika, when he visited his brother-in-law, and every fiber of his body was resonating just by hearing the word Buddha from his brother-in-law. Householder, did you say Buddha? Anathapindika asked in astonishment of his brother-in-law when he first heard of the marvelous word Buddha. Buddha, I did say, householder, replies his brother-in-law. So Anathapindika was so overwhelmed that he repeated the question 3 times and was answered thrice in the same manner. He then said, even this sound, Buddha, Buddha, was truly aspired to the attainment of Buddhahood. He said that even the word Buddha, the word enlightenment, is hard to come by in this world. So he was very inspired just because having heard the word Buddha. So what happens when people are truly aspired to the attainment of Buddhahood? Well, they go for refuges. They go for refuges to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Tam quy y, quy Phật, quy Pháp, quy Tăng, san quy, quy Phật, quy Pháp, quy Sang. There are many examples in the Mahavagga of the Sutta Nipata. There are many examples. For example, having seen the Buddha and heard his teaching, they exclaim, "Excellent, Lord, excellent." It's like carrying a lamp into darkness and having eyes that can see the truth as revealed by the Exalted One. We can now see the truth. So they were very happy to have seen the truth, and therefore they commit themselves to the 3 jewels. We can say that their Buddha nature allowed them to resonate with the Buddha's teaching. So this first one is faith in intuition, where there is something in us that we cannot see, but we feel it, that there's got to be something better than what we have, and that what the Buddha had realized, it's got to be worthwhile to pursue. So we believe that based on our intuition, because we are made of the same intrinsic nature of the Buddha, that we can resonate and kind of appreciate that the Buddha indeed is an enlightened person, that we can believe in him. Okay, so that's the first. Faith is grounded in intuition. The second is faith grounded in reasoning or sensible proof, sensible evidence. Even though the Buddha no longer exists on earth physically, there are still sutras that we can rely on to make that connection between the qualities of the Buddha that he exhibited and his attainment of enlightenment. There is an intimate connection between one's attainment of enlightenment on one hand and one's moral, intellectual, and spiritual qualities on the other hand. So this principle is clearly described in the Pali Canon, such as this one here in the Nikaya, where the Blessed One addressed Kunda, he was a Brahmin. He said that a brother who is an Arhat, Alahang, is one whose asavas are like your mental afflictions or the contaminants, 有漏, 胡漏, or the afflictions are destroyed, who has lived the life, who has done the task, who has laid down the burden, who has reached his own welfare, who has utterly destroyed the bond that binds to becoming. So becoming is a specific stage in the cycle of life and death, and it means rebirth. Rebirth starts with becoming, meaning that we have karma that is coming to fruition. So that's becoming, who is revealed by the knowledge. Such a person is incapable of behaving in 9 ways. He is incapable of intentionally taking life of a creature, incapable of taking what is not given, incapable of practicing the sexual act, telling a deliberate lie, indulging in intoxicants, and storing up foods for indulgence of appetite, and going the wrong path through hatred, greed, hatred, and delusion. In this case, hatred, delusion, and fear. So when a person who has gained enlightenment, he is incapable of doing these things. So we have faith in the Buddha not on his physical appearance, but it's also based on the supreme qualities that he exhibited, which are strongly correlated to enlightenment. So we can see that in the sutra, it describes how the Buddha was perfect in his deed. So we can believe that a person who is perfect in their behavior, their thinkings, their speech, is an enlightened person, right? So not only that we can feel that, hey, there is an enlightenment is real in our heart, in our intuition, but also that based on the sutras that, yes, a person who behaves this way is an enlightened person. So this should constitute as rational proof of the fact that he was enlightened. So our natural behavior and appearances are usually reflections of our states of mind. Right? What we think inside when we're angry, we will display not very attractive face. But when we are compassionate, we usually display naturally an attractive appearance. So from the scriptures, we can see that the Buddha's display of compassion and wisdom to help reinforce the point that an enlightened person is made of compassion and wisdom. So compassion here, not in merely ethical sense, but transcendental insight. Because transcendental insight consists of compassion and wisdom. So the Buddha manifested in his life compassion, kindliness, gentleness, serenity, fearlessness, and a host of similar qualities, which are not virtues, like I said, not merely in ethical sense, but the expression of transcendental insight into reality. 看破真相事实, nhìn thấu chân tướng sự thật. So that's compassion, and then in terms of wisdom, the qualities pertaining to wisdom, which are manifested in the Buddha's teaching, are virtues in the intellectual sense. Right? This is on the intellectual sense, as opposed to on the emotional side of it. So the Buddha was completely enlightened emotionally and intellectually. So it's not just about understanding the Buddha's concept, the Buddha's principles, but to act on those principles and to have the understanding translated into our actions and our emotions. So we are not only intellectual, but we're also emotional, right? Well, we are made of both the intellect and the emotion. So how we feel should be how we understand the Dharma. So these two are the expressions of a realization pertaining to the transcendental order, which are complete freedom from prejudice, infallible judgment, profound intellectuality, powers of analysis, perfect rationality, and absolute freedom from misconceptions and prejudice. So when we have transcendental wisdom or transcendental intellect, then we are free from misconception and error. There are no mistakes in the way that we think, the things that we say, and the things that we do. Right? So based on the sutras, that we can come to a conclusion that we can believe in the Buddha as an enlightened person. So that's faith grounded in the reasoning. The third is faith based on our experience. Because it may not be enough for a person to just have faith in the Buddha, just on the emotional side of it. So when we read the scriptures and we understand the scriptures, it may not be our understanding. We're just borrowing somebody else's work, somebody else's understanding, and it's not ours. And in fact, it may not be related to us. So in this case, we just have to experience it ourselves. That means to actually put what we have learned into practice. We use the sutras as maps to help us to get to the destination of enlightenment. But unless we walk the path, we will never know what that destination is like. For example, we learn about the Four Noble Truths. Right? The Four Noble Truths, 是圣谛都有的, tell us the root cause of suffering is selfish craving. And the path to liberation is the Eightfold Path, 八正道, 八真道. So when we put the teaching into practice, first we notice that we were before, right, emotionally attached and egoistic. And we wanted whatever we set our eyes on to belong to us forever. We were possessive because we wanted what we did not have, we felt lacking, and created selfish cravings for ourselves. Before we had seen the persons, things, situations, 人事物nhân sự vật, we were all right. But after having the experience with them, with those things, we created fresh suffering for ourselves. It is all because we are not happy with what we have. And we thought that we could be more, or we could be happier by possessing those things. So instead of happiness, we face disappointment and dissatisfaction. Why disappointment and dissatisfaction? Well, because after acquiring those things, we usually find that they are not what we originally fantasized. Right? The joyful flavor of the coffee that we wanted to taste so much is not what we imagined. The new friend is not as we imagined. The vacation in some exotic place is not as fun as we were told, etc., etc. Furthermore, the new things that we have now have created fear for ourselves of losing them. Right? Fear of our new car being damaged or scratched, fear of our wealth being stolen or lost, fear of losing our new beautiful boyfriend or girlfriend to someone else, and so on and so on. I remember a story about a friend who told me when we were in college, we used to have this common group of friends. But I did not hang around much with them, so I did not know much about them. So there was one guy in the group that everybody knew he liked a girl in the same group. He kept pursuing her, but she was playing hard to get. She didn't say yes, but she didn't flat out say no either. So she was giving him some hope that she might be his girlfriend if he kept pursuing her. This was going on for about 3 years. Many years later, my friend and I were talking, and then she mentioned to me, "Kenny, you know what? After 3 years of pursuit, they finally were together." And I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, it took him 3 years to pursue her, and finally she said yes to become his girlfriend." So my friend continued, "But did you also know what? After 3 months, he broke up with her." I said in surprise, "Really?" My friend said he couldn't stand her after 3 months. She wasn't as fascinating as he had imagined. Often what we think as joy is just our imagination and not reality. Similarly, the things that we worry about, more than 90% of the times do not happen. It may be more than that. I was reading a book, How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And in the book, he mentions about 95% or greater of the things that we worry about don't come to fruition. So we worry for nothing. And if you look back at your life, most of the things you worry about did not come to fruition. So we worry about because of our wandering thoughts, our fear that create things of imagination. Right? We should be concerned about them, but we should not worry about them. We should he gave an example. As you cross a busy street, you should be concerned about the traffic, but don't go crazy about worrying about traffic hitting you. Right? So that's a smart way of handling things is, yes, things can happen, but just take precautions, but don't worry. Don't go crazy. What this is saying is when we stop the selfish craving, we slow down or even stop suffering. Furthermore, when we become more generous in our giving to help others, we become happier. It is because we have cultivated merits, 修福, 杜福, that we have increased our self-worth. When we are not selfish, people will find us more attractive. They want to care for us and to help us naturally. Without going out there trying hard to find friends, just by doing what is helpful for others, we now have friends. We attract people who are friends to us who truly care about our happiness. So when we follow the Buddha's teachings, we will achieve the results described in the Buddha. So when we put our learning into practice and go through that experience, we will find that, hey, the things mentioned, taught in the sutras are true. The same with meditation. Instead of chasing after worldly pleasures, we find joy in meditation, which is more stable and long-lasting. So the more that we practice, our experience becomes more and more consistent with the sutras. And in this way, we experience for ourselves a certain stage of the path that the Buddha had realized, which is sensible proof of the Buddha's enlightenment, because what he's saying is consistent with our experience. Just like you're trying to get to your destination, and a person says, when you get to the light, make a right-hand side. When you walk for 100 feet, you see a tall building. Enter the building, walk to the third floor, you see this office, and you get to the destination to see that person. We haven't seen that place yet. We haven't been there. But based on the details that person is giving us, we can say, this person knows what he's talking about. So you start walking, and indeed, you see the light, you see the building. There are multiple stories, and you get to the first floor, you see the door as described. And so the more that you practice, the more you realize that what is said in the sutra is real. And so you can confirm that the Buddha knew what he was talking about and that he was an enlightened person. So only when having practiced his teaching do we know beyond all possibility of doubt that the Buddha had himself attained enlightenment. So we just described 3 ways that one can base on to develop faith in the Buddha. One is faith grounded in intuition. 2 is faith grounded in reason and sensible proofs. And 3, faith grounded in our own experience. Okay, so the first one that the Buddha taught in this sutra was about develop the perfection of faith, right? So we can believe in the Buddha based on those 3 grounds. The next is virtue. The text says one can only attain virtues, in this case precepts or morality, if one fulfills the 5 minimum precepts of the moral life. So virtue, that the author uses the word virtue, but in a Chinese translation, it's precept or morality. 戒, giới, right? 持戒, 止giới. And as explained earlier here, that an enlightened being cannot do harm to others. He cannot take life of a creature. So when we observe the precepts, 持戒, 止giới, we are emulating the sages, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, 圣人, 坛人. When those precepts become our natural behavior, then we have virtues. 戒體, giới體. There are many types of precepts, therefore many types of virtues, different levels of existence, 境界, 感giới, even different levels of sagehood, 圣人, 坛人. So for example, let's take an example, human realm. The human existence, 人道, nhân道, is generally governed by the 5 precepts of abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and intoxication. So that's the human realm. The heavenly realm is generally governed by the 10 precepts, consisting of the first 4 elements of the 5 precepts, and then expanding on the false speech to have 4 more, including no lying, no harsh speech, no gossip, no double-tongued speech to create conflict. So that will get us 7, and then you add 3 more, no greed, anger, delusion, to get a total of 10 precepts. And then you also have the realm of bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas practice the 6 paramatas or perfections, 6度波羅蜜, 6度巴拉蜜, including giving or generosity, observing the bodhisattva precepts, forbearance, effort, meditation, and wisdom. So 布施, 持戒, 忍辱, 精进, 禅定, 智慧, bố thí, trì giới, nhẫn nhục, tinh tấn, thiền định, và trí tuệ. So those are the positive realms. The human realm is a mixture of suffering and joy. The general heaven realm is only pleasure, but no wisdom. The Bodhisattva realm is both joy and wisdom, leading to supreme Buddhahood. The negative realms, on the other hand, include hell, hungry ghosts, and animal, 地狱, 恶鬼, 畜生, 地獄, 餓鬼畜生. So these are mostly, these beings are drowned in suffering and delusion. So so when we observe the precepts, we are cultivating, developing virtues. The next thing to attain is generosity. Generosity is possessed by one who is free from the defect of greed, selfish craving. This makes sense since generosity is opposite of selfishness. Generosity is giving and sharing, and selfishness is taking and hoarding. So generosity increases one's merit and value, one's self-worth. When one has high value, one is respected by others. A person who may not have a lot of money, but he's honest and he likes to help others, then other people will have respect for him, will want to have respect for him. On the other hand, one's selfishness decreases one's merits and value. He may drive a nice car and have lots of money, but his dishonesty and selfishness will tarnish his reputation, and he will lose the respect of others. So others will not see him very highly. Right? And then the text goes on to explain about wisdom. So we talked about faith, virtue, and generosity. So these are the things that we want to develop if we want to have, we live meaningful life, long life. And regarding wisdom, wisdom is achieved. The text here says that one achieves wisdom when one realizes that if the heart is riddled with worldly passions, and all the negative emotions, then one does what should not be done and fails to do what should be done. I think this is meant to say that if you start to develop wisdom, when you begin to see your own mistakes and weaknesses and change for the better. So to have wisdom is not just to, for example, regarding greed or stealing. To have wisdom is not just to not take what is given, which is something that should not be done. But in terms of what should be done, one should also be generous in giving, right? So it's a full picture. One is to observe the precept is not only to not take what is not given, but also to give when you see people in need of help. Without wisdom, it gives rise to delusion and mistakes, where one has difficulty distinguishing between wrong and right, skillful and unskillful, 停, 不停. So one who has wisdom constantly investigates and observes his inner impulses and motives. Is one who begins to overcome the 5 hindrances. Hence, their conquest is a consequence of wisdom. The text did not elaborate what the 5 hindrances were, but here I try to elaborate on that based on the Nikaya Sutra, that the 5 hindrances are sensual desire, or selfish craving, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and skeptical doubt. So let me briefly explain what these 5 hindrances are. So to develop wisdom, one will have to constantly investigate and observe one's own mind right? What is one is motivated to do? Not just to go and do based on your impulses, but to understand why you're doing the things that you're doing, and to overcome these 5 hindrances. And these are hindrances because they cover our wisdom. In Chinese, it's called 五盖, năm triển cái, and because they make us delusional. We uncover our wisdom by investigating our inner impulses. This text is telling us. So simply speaking, to overcome sensual desire, we can practice generous giving, and we can visualize suffering, impermanence, and no self, because there is no point in trying to preserve something or possess something that is meant to change, which will only bring dissatisfaction. So that's one way of overcoming sensual desires, is to see it realistically that whatever you're trying to acquire will only lead to dissatisfaction, because it's driven by a greed. Right? Secondly, to overcome ill will is to practice the meditation of loving kindness and compassion. That will help us to neutralize the negative energy in us, all the negative emotions in us. Thirdly, to overcome sloth and torpor, we can exercise to have a healthy body, or you can try to meditate in the early mornings to where you have more energy. So that's one way of overcoming your tiredness. So if sloth or drowsiness is serious and one cannot be easily overcome, then one can try repentance of our past obstructive karmic evil deeds, 忏悔, 三悔. So that's another way of overcoming sloth and torpor, where there's no energy in you to focus, to do what you want to do. You want to meditate, but you feel drowsy, or you want to bow to the Buddha or read sutras, but you get obstructed, you don't have time, or you cannot focus. Right? So one way is to repent. We don't know what we have done in the past, but it's obstructing us. So we know that there is a serious obstruction. It's real. We just don't know what it is. So we can use repentance to eradicate those obstructions. And then fourthly, to overcome restlessness and remorse, we can try meditation. We can focus on our breathing to calm down ourselves, right? That we don't have to think about our worries, but just focus on our breathing. That helps us to calm our mind and the body. And lastly, to overcome skeptical doubt, one can practice commitment and have resolve to attain enlightenment. I'm giving you a quick introduction of this. I will go into more details. What I've done in the past, but next time, because I'm running out of time, next time when we have more time and we have affinity, we will discuss in details. But the Buddha is essentially telling us that to overcome these 5 hindrances can help us to uncover our wisdom. Next, the text says, if the noble disciple, through faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, is well on the way to obtaining the 4 desired things, namely wealth, good reputation, good life, and a path to good rebirth, then he uses his money to accomplish these four good deeds. So you can see that by developing faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom hand in hand, naturally that wealth, good reputation, long life, and good rebirth will accompany such cultivation. So we will have these things naturally without going out there trying to drink medicines or take on nutrients or whatever that's there to make us live longer, or trying to scheme people to have more money to be wealthy. We don't need to do that. All we need to do is have faith in the Buddha, observe the precepts, and practice generosity in our giving to help others, and to investigate our minds to eliminate all the negative energies, all the greed, anger, jealousy, and so forth, to overcome these 5 hindrances so that we can uncover our wisdom to allow us to see what's wrong, what's right, what's good, what's bad, what's skillful, what's unskillful. Then wealth, good reputation, long life, and a path to a good rebirth will be assured. So this is reality. Merits are necessary in life, not only in the worldly life, but also in the spiritual life. In other words, you cannot just sit in meditation, not do anything to help anybody, and hope that you will be able to achieve enlightenment. It doesn't work that way. We need to have merits in order to help us to build a foundation to make things easier for us. Otherwise, we have obstructions after obstructions after obstructions. Right? If people are not obstructing us, things will obstructing us. If things outside don't obstruct us, our own mind will obstruct us. We will have worries. Right? You cannot sit in meditation and enjoy the meditation if you have unpaid bills and you have debt collectors running after you. You will not be able to sit very peacefully. So merits are necessary. Without karmic rewards, 福报, 福报, we will face all kinds of obstructions and hardships. So the noble disciples cultivates merits to attain wealth, good reputation, long life, and good rebirth, not to indulge, right, 享受福报, hướng thọ phước báo, but to propagate the Dharma and to work for the good of Buddhism. If we are not wealthy, how will anyone believe us? And when we say wealth comes to those who are generous in giving, right? If we don't have good reputations, nobody will believe our words. If we don't live a long, healthy life, it will be very difficult to try to convince people of the benefits of the Dharma. So we should work hard to serve and help others, and to create a skillful and learning environment for them to develop and grow. Lastly, if we don't have a good rebirth, then all of our efforts will be of no benefits to us. If we can have rebirth in Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới, that will be the greatest benefits that we can have from our practice in this lifetime. Okay, because we will be forever liberated from the suffering in the cycle of life and death, and enlightenment is guaranteed. Therefore, the noble disciple is wise when he uses his money to accomplish these 4 deeds: virtue, faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. Right? So using money in this way to accomplish the 4 deeds is a wise spiritual investment. Now, the return on worldly investment is not guaranteed, and the bank will tell you that, right? Past performance is no guarantee of future results. But a return on spiritual investment is always guaranteed. Why? Well, you look at it this way, worldly investments are based on greed, right? And therefore, they are not guaranteed a positive return. As explained earlier, greed or selfishness depletes one's self-worth or value. If you are not worth that much, then you won't be able to deserve more than that much. Spiritual investments, on the other hand, are based on generosity and virtue, which brings benefits to others. And so as a result, they increase one's value and self-worth. Therefore, one will naturally increase one's wealth based on conditionality. Right? We cultivate faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. Naturally, we will have wealth, good reputation, long life, and a path to a good rebirth. Next, the text says, this makes him, his family, as well as his friends. He avoids accidents or disasters. He performs the 5 above-mentioned duties, and he supports genuine ascetics and priests, monastics. By whomever wealth has been spent in other than these 4 ways, those riches have not fulfilled their purpose, and they have been senselessly squandered. So with faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, friends, family, those around him or her, and himself or herself are happy. They can avoid accidents and disasters, or at least minimize the harm and the impact. So this is a timely advice given the hurricane approaching. We have never seen so many disasters around the world happening regularly, and they seem to be more serious each time. And they have taken lives and cost billions of dollars to repair and to recover. When people cultivate faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, they themselves will be able to avoid disasters. Why is that? Well, if you look at it this way, it is because they have high self-worth or value. Generally speaking, nature will protect those who protect life and are valuable to nature. So those who help others and make Earth a better place, as opposed to hurting others and destroying the environment, are valuable to nature. Right? Do you agree? Right? When we cultivate virtue and observe the precepts 持戒, 己giới, and practice generosity giving, 菩提, or 布施, it should not be limited to only helping people, but it should also benefit animals and the environment. Right? We should reuse and recycle as much as possible and reduce waste that are harmful to the environment. We should use reusable cups, like this one, and avoid plastic cups and containers because they are very destructive to the environment. Furthermore, we should use money to help those who propagate the Dharma, including genuine monastic and lay practitioners. Right? If our money doesn't help us to accomplish faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, the Buddha says, then it is essentially wasting money, which won't bring long and prosperous life and future good rebirth. And this will be a terrible way to use one's wealth. So more important than having money is to be able to use it in a meaningful way that brings benefits to the current life, to our current life, and future lives. So I have a few more minutes, and let's go to the last part where the Buddha explains the 2 types of people who use money leading to different results. So we will cover this part quickly and then conclude. 2 types of people with wealth. One is that those who are strongly attached to their wealth and being infatuated are unaware of its inherent danger, not seeking a way out. So this is what the Buddha called foolish. I think we're getting warnings from the city of the danger of the hurricane that's coming. And so as a result of this group of people who are so attached to the wealth that they put themselves in harm's way, they will get hurt even without being aware of the danger, and therefore they're not seeking their way out of the danger. The other type that the Buddha explains here, those people are not attached to the wealth, that are not infatuated by it, but are aware of its inherent danger and know the way out of it. So there are 10 types of people who enjoy worldly pleasures concerned with wealth. We won't go into that. But this type here is that they're not attached to their wealth, and therefore they have this awareness. They know the danger of money and know the danger to be a slave to money. So one knows a way out of danger, meaning that one knows how to make good use of money to accomplish faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, which helps him to avoid disasters. So let's quickly summarize today's talk, and then we adjourn. It's possible to live a long and healthy life and reach great age by accomplishing the 4 good deeds: faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom. So it's not just to live a long life, but to live a meaningful life. There was an article in the Atlantic magazine entitled, "Why I Hope to Die at 75." A very interesting article. The article starts out 75. That's how long I want to live. 75 years. The author clarified that he was not crazy, and it was not a death wish. The author is an oncologist, biotechnologist, and the vice provost of the University of Pennsylvania. So he is an intelligent person, right? He knows what he's talking about. He said half of people 80 and older have functional limitations. A third of people 85 and older have Alzheimer's disease. So they are, in a way, very limited. They live with disabilities. Right? They live a long life with medical help, but they live with disabilities. Is that meaningful? Right? He asked, is that something that you want to do, to live to your 100 years of age, but then after 75, for example, you live with medical devices to help you to breathe, right? To help you to live. Is that meaningful? Right? So it's not about living a long life, but we should strive to live a healthy and meaningful life. Yeah, that's why he says essentially people may live longer with medical assistance, but their quality of life suffers with disabilities. So he asks, is that worth it? Right? Is that worth the life we want to have? So when we have faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, our lives will be of meaning, right? We will live a meaningful life. So faith is to believe in the Buddha and to be aspired that we too can achieve enlightenment with sensible proof based on our intuitions, rational evidence in the sutras, and our own experience. So we should practice what we learned. And accomplishing virtue is to make the observance of precepts become a natural part of our lives, our behavior. If our behavior is not naturally consistent with the precepts, then we can emulate bodhisattvas by disciplining ourselves to observe the precepts. And there are many types of precepts, 5 precepts, 10 precepts, bodhisattvas precepts, right? And next is generosity, to give and help others. Generous in our giving, helping. So the disasters that's coming, right? There will be organizations calling upon the community to help, and we should be willing to open our pocket to help them. But we should also be mindful that there are people who are taking advantage of the situation to scam people. So we should be aware, and we should give to reputable organizations that we know will do good deeds. So one way is you can go online and go to, I think, Charity Navigator, and you can look at the profile of those organizations that you want to support to see how efficient they are in using the money. For every dollar that you give, do they spend 80% of the money on things that are not related to directly related to the cost, right? So you can go there and check out their efficiency, see how well they perform with the money, your hard-earned money, to support a good cause. So don't just give because people ask, but make sure you're giving to a legitimate organization. But we should be willing to open our pockets to help those in need. And I think today, tomorrow, there will be a lot of damage done. Unfortunately, that's part of life. But if we cultivate faith, virtue, generosity, and wisdom, we will be able to avert disasters happening to us. Meaning that we are empowered with money and strength to help others, right? We are not impacted by the disasters, which is good, but we should help use our well-being and our money that we have to help those in need. And then finally, we uncover our wisdom by investigating the nature of phenomena to understand clearly, what's wrong, between what's wrong, what's right, and skillful, etc. More reliable of return on investment is that of spiritual investment. So accumulating wealth in honest ways, not being infatuated by wealth, but using one's wealth to help others can help to avoid accidents and disasters for oneself. Right? So it's not about having money, but how to use it meaningfully. It's not about living a long life, but to live a meaningful life. Okay, so that comes to the end of our discussion today, and we will continue next time. So hopefully that's clear enough, and it's motivating enough. It gives us a sense of purpose, of the beautiful life that we have, right? The support that we have, the strength. We can walk, we can talk, we can be independent. So we are blessed with our independence, right? We're not destitute, which is thank the Buddha for that. But we should be reminded that those things, our fortune, small or big, are fortunes, and they should be used in meaningful ways, right? So one of them, which is to help others. Because when we have the ability to help others, that means we have been helped already, right? Because if you have no ability to help, then how can you help others? The fact that we can help others, that means that we have been already helped, right? So you always want to be on the giving side and avoid being on the receiving side. Right? It's more empowering.